My name is Emily Carter. I am 34 years old, and I have been married to my husband Daniel for 9 years. Last Saturday was supposed to be simple. Just a quiet anniversary dinner with family and a few close friends. Nothing extravagant. Just good food, soft music, and a moment to celebrate the life we had built together. The house was warm and full. People were laughing, glasses were clinking, and someone had just started recording as Daniel wrapped his arm around me and smiled.
9 years, he said. Still putting up with me.
I laughed and leaned into him, ready to cut the cake. But before the knife even touched it, a voice cut through the room. Actually, before we celebrate, I think everyone deserves to know something. The entire room turned. Standing near the dining table was Daniel's sister, Vanessa. She was holding her phone, her posture straight, her expression calm in a way that didn't feel right. Daniel frowned and asked what she was doing. Vanessa didn't look at him. She looked at me, and then she said it. "Your wife has been cheating on you." At first, no one reacted. It was like the words needed a second to land. Then the whisper started. Quiet, sharp, spreading faster than I could even process. Vanessa stepped forward and lifted her phone so everyone could see. Messages, photos, conversations that looked intimate enough to destroy a marriage. Daniel's arm slowly slipped away from my shoulder. "Emily," he said quietly. I could feel every eye in the room on me, waiting, judging, deciding. And in that moment, when everything should have fallen apart, I did something no one expected. I smiled, because a week earlier, I had already discovered something Vanessa didn't know. And I was about to let her show everyone exactly who she really was. If you had met Daniel's family that night, you probably would have thought they were warm, welcoming, and close. And, to be fair, most of them were. His parents had always treated me kindly, and his cousins were easy to get along with. But there was always one exception. Vanessa. From the very beginning, something about me didn't sit right with her. She never said anything openly at first.
It was more subtle then. That.
A look that lasted a second too long. A smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Comments that sounded harmless, but carried a quiet edge. "You're lucky Daniel takes care of everything," she once said during our first year of marriage. I remember smiling politely, not wanting to make it awkward. But over time, those small moments started to add up. At family dinners, she would make little jokes about how I married into comfort. At holidays, she would bring up stories that painted me as someone who didn't really belong. Always light enough to pass as teasing, but sharp enough that I felt it every time. The difficult part was that no one else seemed to notice. Or if they did, they brushed it off. Daniel especially. He would tell me I was reading too much into it. That Vanessa had always been blunt. That she didn't mean anything by it. And for a long time, I convinced myself he was right. Because the truth is, when you love someone, you try to fit into their world. You adjust. You stay quiet. You tell yourself it's not worth creating tension over small things. So, I let it go, year after year, until it stopped feeling small. And by the time we reached our 9th anniversary, Vanessa wasn't even pretending anymore. That night, as I watched her move through the room, whispering to a few relatives, catching eyes, and holding them just a little too long, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit before. This wasn't just dislike anymore. She had been waiting for something. And somehow, she believed that night was her moment. By the time we gathered in the living room, the house looked exactly how a celebration should look. The lights were slightly dimmed, soft music played in the background, and the dining table was still full of half-finished plates and glasses. Someone had lit the candles on the cake, and a few guests were already holding up their phones, ready to capture the moment. From the outside, everything felt perfect, but something underneath it all felt wrong. I noticed it in the way conversations would pause for just a second when I walked closer. In the way a couple of people gave me quick, unreadable looks before turning away. It was subtle, but it was
there.
And then there was Vanessa. She wasn't loud. She wasn't drawing attention to herself. But she was moving through the room with a kind of quiet purpose. Leaning in close to certain people. Whispering something. Watching their reactions carefully. At one point, I caught her looking directly at me from across the room. She didn't look away. She just smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not even a polite one. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they think they already know how something is going to end. I felt a small knot tighten in my stomach. Daniel noticed before I said anything. He leaned closer and asked if I was okay. I nodded quickly and told him I was just a little tired. I didn't want to ruin the night over a feeling I couldn't explain. But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't the truth. There's a moment sometimes before something goes wrong where everything feels slightly out of place. Not enough to stop it. Not enough to prove anything. Just enough to make you uneasy. That was exactly how I felt standing there. Like the room was holding its breath. Like something had already been set in motion, and I was the only one who hadn't seen it yet. Or maybe the only one who had. Because a part of me already knew. Whatever Vanessa had planned, it wasn't going to stay hidden for long. When everyone gathered around the cake, I tried to push the feeling aside. Daniel stood next to me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. Someone dimmed the lights a little more, and the soft glow from the candles flickered across the room. A few people started clapping, and for a brief moment, it felt like everything had settled back into place. 9 years, Daniel said again, smiling as he looked at me. Can you believe it? I smiled back, steady on the outside, even though something inside me still felt off. I was just about to reach for the knife when Vanessa's voice cut through the moment. Actually, before we celebrate, I think everyone deserves to know something first. This time, there was no hesitation. Every conversation stopped immediately. The room turned toward her, as if pulled by the same thread. Daniel let out a quiet sigh and asked her what she was doing, his tone already tense. But Vanessa didn't answer him. She took a few steps forward, holding her phone in front of her, and then she said it clearly, loudly, without a trace of doubt. Your wife has been cheating on you. The words didn't just land. They spread. You could hear it in the way people shifted, in the sharp inhale from someone near the back, in the low whispers that followed almost instantly. What did she say? Is that true? Vanessa turned her screen outward, slowly, deliberately, making sure as many people as possible could see. Messages filled the display. Long conversations. Intimate lines. Photos that looked real enough to leave no room for doubt. From where I stood, I could hear fragments of what people were reading. This doesn't look good. Oh my God, Daniel's hand slipped away from my shoulder. He didn't step back, but something changed. I could feel it without even looking at him. Emily, he said quietly. There was confusion in his voice. And something else. Hurt. For a second, the room felt like it tilted. Dozens of eyes were on me now, waiting for me to react, waiting for me to deny it, to explain, to fall apart. Vanessa was watching me closely, her expression calm, almost satisfied, like she had already decided how this was going to end. And in that moment, I understood exactly what she wanted. She wanted panic. She wanted tears. She wanted me to defend myself in a way that would only make everything look worse. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't surprised. Not even a little. Because a week earlier, something had happened that changed everything. And instead of reacting the way everyone expected, I took a slow breath, looked directly at her, and smiled. For a moment, no one said anything. The whispers faded into a heavy silence, the kind that makes every small movement feel louder than it should. I could feel the weight of the room pressing in, waiting for me to respond. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, studying my face. Why are you smiling? She asked, her voice sharp now. I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I looked around the room, at the guests, at Daniel, at his parents, taking in every expression, every doubt, every assumption that had already started to form. Then I looked back at Vanessa. You brought your phone, I said calmly. Why don't we connect it to the TV? A few people shifted, surprised by the suggestion. Vanessa frowned. What so everyone can see the evidence clearly, I continued, my tone steady. The screen is small. This way, no one has to guess. For a second, she didn't move. I could see it in her eyes. That brief flicker of hesitation she tried to hide. But it was there. Then she let out a short laugh.
Fine, she said.
If that's what you want. She turned and walked toward the television, her confidence returning just enough to cover the pause. Someone nearby handed Daniel a cable, and after a moment of hesitation, he stepped forward and connected her phone to the screen. The room stayed completely quiet as the television lit up. A second later, the messages appeared again, now larger, clearer, impossible to ignore. People leaned forward slightly, reading. The whispers came back, softer this time, but heavier. "That looks real. I don't see how this could be fake." Daniel stared at the screen for a long moment before turning toward me again. "Emily, you need to explain this." I nodded once. "I will," I said. Then I glanced at Vanessa, who had crossed her arms again, her posture tight now, her expression carefully controlled. But first, I added quietly, "Let's make sure everyone sees everything." I stayed where I was, not rushing, not reacting to the tension in the room. Everyone was watching the screen, but I could feel their attention shifting back to me, waiting for something that made sense. I took a slow breath. "About a week ago," I said, "I received a security alert on my phone." A few people glanced at each other, unsure where I was going with it. Vanessa let out a quiet scoff. "People get those all the time," she said quickly. "That doesn't prove anything." I nodded slightly. "You're right," I said. "Most of the time it doesn't." That seemed to relax her for half a second. But then I continued. This one was different. The room stayed still. It didn't just say someone tried to log into my account. It showed the device location. That got people's attention. I saw a couple of heads lift, a few. Expressions shift from doubt to curiosity. Vanessa's arms tightened slightly across her chest. "That still doesn't mean anything," she said, a little faster this time. I didn't look at her. Instead, I kept my eyes on the television, where the messages were still displayed. "Maybe not," I said calmly. But it made me curious. Daniel stepped a little closer. "What are you trying to say, Emily?" I turned toward him. "I'm saying I didn't ignore it," I replied. "I decided to look into it." The room went quiet again. Vanessa shifted her weight. "So now you're a security expert," she said, forcing a small laugh. I didn't react to the tone.
"No," I said.
"But I know people who are." That landed differently. You could feel it, because suddenly, this wasn't just about denial anymore. It wasn't emotional. It was factual. I took another step toward the television. Asked a friend to help me trace where that login attempt came from. Vanessa's expression flickered. Just for a second. But it was enough. Daniel noticed it too. I could see it in the way he looked at her, then back at me. And that's when the room started to shift. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. Like people were beginning to realize that the story they had just accepted might not be the whole truth. I reached for the remote on the table beside the television. For a brief second, no one spoke. Vanessa's voice cut in quickly. "You're trying to confuse everyone," she said. "Just explain the messages." I didn't look at her. I pressed a button. The screen changed. The messages disappeared, replaced by a simple report. Clean lines.
Dates.
Login attempts. Device information. Nothing dramatic. Just facts. At first, people leaned in, trying to understand what they were looking at. Then someone near the back spoke quietly. "Wait, what is that?" I stepped slightly to the side, so everyone could see clearly. "This is the login record for my account," I said. "The one I mentioned." Daniel's eyes moved across the screen slowly. Dates matched. Times matched. Everything lined up. Then his gaze stopped. Right there in the middle of the report. Device location. No one said anything for a second. Then another voice, louder this time.
"Is that A?"
Name a few people stepped closer. Someone read it out.
"Vanet Shabaduk laptop."
The room went completely silent. Not the kind of silence filled with whispers. The kind where no one even knows what to say. I didn't move. I just let it sit there. Vanessa didn't react at first. She stared at the screen, her expression blank, like her mind was trying to catch up with what had just happened. Then she shook her head quickly. "That's fake," she said. "You made that up." Her voice was steady, but it didn't sound convincing anymore. Daniel turned toward her slowly. "Vanessa," he said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "What is this?" She let out a short laugh.
"I don't know," she said.
"Anyone could have used my laptop." The excuse came too fast. Too prepared. And for the first time that night, people weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at her. I could see it in their faces. The shift. The doubt moving in a different direction. I took a small breath. Those messages, I said calmly, were created from the same device that tried to access my account. Vanessa's eyes snapped toward me. I held her gaze. So no, I added quietly, they don't scare me. Because they were never real. They were built. And now, everyone in that room was starting to understand exactly who built them. For a moment, no one moved. The air in the room felt heavier now, like everything had shifted but hadn't fully settled yet. Vanessa was still standing near the television, but her posture had changed. The confidence she had earlier was gone. In its place was something tighter, controlled, defensive. Daniel was looking at her, not at me anymore. And that's when I knew the truth had started to land. But I wasn't finished. There's something else, I said quietly. Vanessa's head turned toward me immediately. Don't, she said under her breath. I ignored it. About a week ago, I continued, around the same time I received that security alert, something else happened. Daniel frowned slightly. What do you mean? I met his eyes for a moment. Money went missing from the family business account. That changed everything. A few people in the room straightened. Someone whispered something I couldn't quite hear. Vanessa let out a sharp laugh. That's not true, she said quickly. You're just trying to make this worse. I didn't respond to her. Instead, I pressed another button on the remote. The screen changed again. This time, it wasn't a report. It was a set of bank records.
Clear. Organized.
Impossible to misread. Transfers. Multiple ones. Moving money out of the account over several days. Daniel stepped closer to the screen. His voice was quieter now. What is this? I spoke calmly. Those are transactions from the business account. He kept staring. Then his eyes stopped. On the name attached to each transfer. Vanessa Brooks. The room didn't explode this time. It didn't need to. The silence said everything. Vanessa shook her head again. Faster now. This is fake, she said. This is all fake. But her voice was starting to break. I took a steady breath. It adds up to just over $80,000, I said. No one interrupted. No one defended her. Because now it wasn't just about a lie. It was about something much bigger. And everyone in that room could see it clearly. Vanessa looked around the room like she was searching for something to hold on to. Support. Agreement. Anything. But no one stepped in. Not a single voice came to her defense. You don't understand, she said suddenly, louder now. Her eyes moved from one face to another, desperate to regain control of the moment. Daniel didn't move. He stood there, staring at the screen, then slowly turned back to her. How much? He asked.
His voice was calm. Too calm.
Vanessa hesitated. It was just a few transfers, she said, her tone weaker now. I shook my head slightly. It was over 80,000, I said. That number settled over the room like weight. Daniel closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if trying to process everything at once. Then he looked at her again. So you took money from the business, he said slowly. Vanessa shook her head. I was going to fix it, she said quickly. I just needed time. And when that didn't sound convincing, she pushed forward again. I did it for you, she added, her voice rising. Daniel's expression didn't change. For me, yes, she said, almost pleading now. She was going to turn you against the family. I was protecting you. The words hung there, but they didn't land the way she wanted. Because nothing about this looked like protection anymore. It looked like control. Like resentment. Like something that had been building for a long time. Daniel took a slow breath. Then he shook his head. No, he said quietly. His voice wasn't angry. It was final. You did this to yourself. Vanessa's shoulders dropped slightly. For the first time that night, she didn't argue back. She didn't have anything left to say. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The room that had been filled with whispers and tension was now completely still. It felt different. Not heavy like before, but quiet in a way that comes after something finally makes sense. Vanessa stood there, her eyes moving across the room one last time. No one met her gaze. Not Daniel. Not his parents. Not the guests she had tried to convince just minutes earlier. She picked up her purse slowly. No one stopped her. No one asked her to stay. And without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. The sound of it closing behind her was softer than I expected, but somehow it carried, like the end of something that had been building for years. For a moment longer, everyone remained where they were, as if unsure what to do next. Then Daniel moved. He walked toward me, slower than usual, like he was still processing everything. When he reached me, he didn't speak right away.
He just looked at me.
Really looked. And I could see it in his expression. The confusion was gone. The doubt was gone. What was left was something quieter. Regret. Emily, he said finally.
I'm sorry.
There was no hesitation in his voice this time.
No uncertainty.
Just honesty. I nodded once. I know, I said.
And that was enough.
For a moment, we just stood there. The room was still quiet, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It felt like everyone was slowly finding their place again after something unexpected had unfolded right in front of them. Then someone near the back cleared their throat. So, are we still cutting the cake? A few people let out soft, nervous laughs. It broke the tension just enough. Daniel looked at me, his expression gentler.
Now.
Do you still want to celebrate? He asked. I glanced at the cake, the candles still flickering, slightly uneven now from how long they had been burning. Then I looked back at him. Yes, I said. Not because the night had gone the way we planned, but because it meant something different now. He gave a small nod. And this time, when he reached for my hand, he didn't hesitate. He held it firmly, like he wasn't going to let go again. We stepped back toward the table together. Someone dimmed the lights a little more, and the room slowly came back to life. Conversations restarted, quieter than before, but warmer. As I picked up the knife again, I realized something. The truth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it waits. And when it finally shows up, it doesn't need to fight to be heard. It just needs the right moment. That night didn't just change how people saw Vanessa. It changed how I saw everything. For years, I thought staying quiet was the right choice. I believed that if I avoided conflict, if I kept the peace, things would eventually settle on their own. But the truth is, silence doesn't always protect you. Sometimes, it gives the wrong people space to build a story about you. And if you're not careful, that story can grow into something that feels impossible to undo. What I learned that night is simple. You don't always have to fight back with emotion. You don't have to argue louder or defend yourself harder. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is stay calm, stay clear, and let the truth speak for itself. Because when it does, it doesn't just correct the lie. It reveals the person behind it. If you've ever been judged unfairly or placed in a situation where people assumed the worst about you, I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Because sometimes the truth takes time, but it always finds its way to the surface.